I remember the day I decided to become someone I was not. It was a cool autumn morning when my son called me with news that would change everything. His voice was warm and hopeful as he told me that he and Jia had finally agreed I should move in with them. After years of living alone in my small apartment across the city, I would finally be close to my only child again. But as I hung up the phone that day, I felt something twist inside my chest. It was not joy. It was fear. You see, I had heard stories. So many stories from other mothers like me. Women who raised their sons with every ounce of strength they had, only to watch them drift away once a wife entered the picture. I had seen friends weep quietly in tea houses, their voices breaking as they described how their daughters-in-law treated them like servants or burdens. I had witnessed the slow erasure of a mother's place in her son's heart, replaced by someone who saw her as competition rather than family. And so I made a decision that would haunt me in ways I could not yet imagine. I would test her. I would strip away my comfortable life, my financial security, my independence, and present myself as someone fragile and needy. I would watch how Jia treated me when she thought I had nothing to offer. Only then would I know if my son had married a woman with a kind heart or a calculating mind. The preparation took weeks. I withdrew from social activities. I bought plain, worn clothing from second-hand shops. I practiced walking with a slight limp, holding my back as if chronic pain had aged me beyond my years. I rehearsed conversations where I would mention financial struggles, medical bills I could barely afford, a pension that barely covered my needs. Every detail mattered. Every gesture had to be convincing. When the moving day arrived, I stood in front of my mirror one last time. The woman staring back at me looked 20 years older than her reflection from a month ago. Gray streaks I had stopped dyeing. Clothes that hung loose on my frame. A tiredness in my eyes that I had learned to summon at will. I barely recognized myself. And for a moment, I wondered if I was making a terrible mistake. My son arrived with a rented van and 2 young men to help carry my belongings. I had carefully selected only the oldest, most worn items from my home. The sturdy furniture I had purchased over the years stayed behind in storage. The jewelry my late husband had given me remained locked in a safety deposit box. Even my winter coats, the ones lined with real wool, were replaced with thin, threadbare substitutes. I was constructing a character, and every prop had to support the illusion. The drive to their home felt longer than it actually was. My son chatted happily about the room they had prepared for me, how excited Jia was to finally have me close, how they had been planning special meals to welcome me. His words should have warmed my heart. Instead, they made my deception feel heavier. I smiled and nodded, but inside, guilt was already beginning to whisper. Their apartment was beautiful. Modern and spacious, decorated with Jia's impeccable taste. She greeted me at the door with a smile that seemed genuine enough, her arms opening for an embrace. I let her hug me, noting how her body stiffened slightly when she felt how thin I had become. Her eyes scanned my worn clothing, the single battered suitcase that held my belongings, the old cardboard boxes tied with string instead of tape. "Welcome home, Mother Mei Lin," she said, her voice bright but her eyes already calculating something I could not quite read. The room they gave me was small but clean. A single bed pushed against the wall, a narrow dresser, a window that looked out onto the neighboring building. It was the kind of room you give to someone you are obligated to house but do not particularly want to accommodate. I told myself this was expected. I was playing the role of a burden, after all. But still, something in my chest tightened as I unpacked my few belongings. That first dinner was a performance for all of us. Jia had cooked an elaborate meal, displaying her skills with pride. My son beamed as he served me, asking repeatedly if I liked the food, if I was comfortable, if I needed anything. Jia watched me with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. She made comments about how difficult it must be for me to adjust, how she understood that older people often struggled with change, how she hoped I would not find their modern lifestyle too overwhelming. Her words were kind. But underneath them, I heard something else. A subtle positioning of herself as the generous younger woman taking in a helpless elder. A quiet assertion of her place as the true woman of this household. I ate slowly, playing my part, agreeing that yes, everything was so different from what I was used to. Yes, I would try my best not to be too much trouble. The days that followed established a rhythm. I woke early as I always had, but I moved slowly through the apartment, careful to seem frail and uncertain. Jia worked from home several days a week, and I observed her carefully during those hours when my son was at his office. She was not unkind, Exactly. She would make tea and bring me a cup without being asked. She would inquire about my health, whether my back was hurting, whether I had slept well. But there were moments. Small moments that made my skin prickle with unease. Like the morning I offered to help prepare lunch, and she gently but firmly guided me back to my room, saying I should rest, that she did not want me to strain myself. The tone was caring, but the message was clear. This was her kitchen, her domain. I was a guest, not a participant. Or the afternoon I suggested a small repair to a loose cabinet handle, mentioning I had tools in my bag, and she laughed lightly, saying there was no need for me to worry about such things, that they would call someone professional when they had time. As if my years of maintaining my own home meant nothing. As if I had never been capable of anything. Or the evening I received a phone call from an old friend, and Jia hovered nearby, clearly listening, her face tightening when my friend mentioned a community event I used to organize. After I hung up, Jia asked if I used to be very active socially. I said yes, but that my health had made everything difficult in recent years. She nodded sympathetically, but I saw something else flicker across her face. Surprise, perhaps. Or suspicion. My son noticed none of this. He came home from work tired and happy to find his mother and his wife coexisting peacefully. He would kiss Jia, then come to my room to check on me, sitting on the edge of my bed like he did when he was a boy, telling me about his day. Those moments were pure and real, and they made my deception feel like poison in my veins. Sometimes I wanted to stop. To tell him everything. To admit that I was not the struggling, fragile woman he thought I had become. But then I would remember the stories. The mothers who had trusted blindly and lost everything. The women who had welcomed daughters-in-law with open arms, only to find themselves isolated, disrespected, erased from their own sons' lives. So I continued. And I watched. Jia's behavior was inconsistent in ways that confused me. Some days she was attentive and warm, chatting with me about her work, asking my opinion on small household matters, including me in conversations. On those days, I felt hope blooming in my chest. Perhaps I had been wrong. Perhaps she was genuinely kind, and my test was unnecessary and cruel. But then other days would come. Days when her face would tighten the moment my son left for work. Days when she would speak to me in short, clipped sentences, her patience visibly thin. Days when I would hear her on the phone with friends, complaining about the challenges of having a mother-in-law living with them, how her life had become so complicated, how she had to be careful about everything now. I tried to make sense of these contradictions. Was she a good person struggling with a difficult situation? Or was she a skilled performer who showed different faces to different audiences? The uncertainty gnawed at me. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after I moved in, something happened that deepened my confusion. I had been sitting in the living room, pretending to nap in the armchair, when Jia thought I was truly asleep. She sat at the dining table with her laptop, working on something, and her phone rang. It was her mother. The conversation started normally enough, but then I heard Jia's voice shift, becoming younger, more vulnerable. She was telling her mother how hard everything was, how she was trying her best to be patient and kind, but how exhausting it was to have someone watching her all the time, judging her, making her feel inadequate in her own home. My eyes remained closed, but my heart raced. She felt judged by me. She felt inadequate. This woman who seemed so confident, so in control, was carrying her own fears and insecurities. For the first time, it occurred to me that perhaps I was not the only one performing in this household. Perhaps Jia was also pretending, also trying to meet expectations she did not fully understand. But then her tone shifted again, becoming sharper. She told her mother that she did not understand why older people could not just be grateful, why they always had to make everything so complicated, why they expected to be catered to like royalty when they contributed nothing to the household. Her words stung like wasps. I sat perfectly still, barely breathing, as she continued complaining about the financial strain, the loss of privacy, the constant feeling of being observed and found wanting. When she finally ended the call, I waited several long minutes before stirring, pretending to wake naturally from my nap. Jia turned to me with a smile, asking if I wanted some fruit, her voice sweet and concerned. I accepted, thanking her softly, and watched as she moved to the kitchen to prepare a plate for me. Who was the real Jia? The kind woman who brought me fruit? Or the resentful one who complained about my presence the moment she thought I could not hear? And more troubling still, which version would become permanent once she felt secure in her position? That night, I lay in my narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of my son and his wife preparing for sleep in their room down the hall. I heard their muffled voices, an occasional laugh, the intimate sounds of a couple comfortable with each other. And I felt like an intruder, an unwanted presence in their lives. But I also felt something else. A growing certainty that my test, however painful, was necessary. Because I could not yet tell if Gia's kindness was genuine compassion or strategic performance. I could not yet know if she would honor me as her husband's mother or merely tolerate me as an inconvenient obligation. The weeks stretched on, and the small tensions accumulated like dust in corners. Nothing explosive. Nothing I could point to as evidence of mistreatment. Just a constant low-level discomfort that made every day feel like walking on ice that might crack at any moment. I began to notice how Gia controlled information. When relatives called, she would answer the phone and give them brief updates about me before handing me the receiver, effectively framing the conversation before I even spoke. When neighbors asked about me, she would explain my situation with a mixture of concern and subtle implications that I was more fragile than I actually was, more dependent, more challenging to care for. She was building a narrative. And in that narrative, she was the devoted daughter-in-law, sacrificing her comfort and freedom to care for an elderly, difficult mother-in-law. The fact that I was not actually difficult did not seem to matter. She was preparing the ground for something, though I did not yet know what. My son remained oblivious. He saw his wife bringing me tea, asking about my medications, making sure I had everything I needed. He saw the surface, the performance we were both giving, and he believed it was real. Sometimes I watched him look at Gia with such love and gratitude, thanking her for being so good to his mother, and I felt my heart break a little more. Because I knew I had put her in an impossible position. I had entered her home as a fabricated version of myself, demanding accommodation for needs I did not actually have, creating obstacles that did not truly exist. And now I was judging her for resenting those very things I had artificially imposed on her life. The guilt was becoming unbearable. But so was the uncertainty. And I did not know how to stop what I had started without destroying everything. One evening, as autumn deepened into early winter, I sat by my window watching the sun set behind the neighboring buildings. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, beautiful and temporary, and I wondered if I had already ruined any chance of a genuine relationship with my daughter-in-law. Perhaps by starting with deception, I had poisoned the soil where trust should have grown. But it was too late to turn back now. The test had begun, and I had no choice but to see it through to whatever end awaited us all. The memories come to me most often in the early morning hours, when the apartment is still quiet and I lie in my narrow bed watching the gray light creep across the ceiling. In those moments before the day begins, before I must put on my mask of frailty and need, I allow myself to remember who I really am. Or perhaps who I used to be, before grief and fear reshaped me into this cautious, calculating woman. I was 19 when I married my husband, Lin Wei. He was 23, serious and hard-working, with kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. Our marriage was arranged by our families, as was common then, but we were fortunate. We grew to love each other deeply over the years we shared. Those early years were not easy. We had so little money. Lin Wei worked in a factory, and I took in sewing and mending to contribute what I could. We lived in a single room barely larger than the one I occupy now in my son's apartment, and we shared a bathroom with 3 other families down the hall. But we were happy. We had each other, and we had dreams of building something better. When I became pregnant, we were terrified and overjoyed in equal measure. We could barely afford to feed ourselves, let alone a child. But Lin Wei took extra shifts, and I sewed late into the night, my fingers cramping, my eyes burning, determined to save every coin possible. The day my son was born, I held him in my arms and felt something shift in the universe. This tiny, perfect being, so vulnerable and dependent, was now the center of everything. I looked into his newborn eyes and made a silent vow that he would have a better life than we had known. That he would be educated, secure, free from the crushing weight of poverty that had defined my own childhood. Lin Wei felt the same. We named our son June, hoping he would grow to be talented and accomplished. And we poured everything we had into making that hope a reality. But life had other plans. June was only 8 years old when Lin Wei began feeling unwell. At first, we thought it was exhaustion from his long hours at the factory. He would come home pale and tired, unable to eat much dinner, going to bed earlier and earlier. I urged him to see a doctor, but medical care was expensive, and he insisted he just needed rest. By the time we finally took him to the hospital, The cancer had already spread throughout his body. The doctors gave him 6 months. He lasted 4. I remember every moment of those final months with a clarity that still takes my breath away. The way his hand felt in mine, growing thinner each day. The sound of his breathing becoming more labored. The morning he made me promise that I would give June every opportunity, that I would sacrifice whatever necessary to ensure our son's future. I made that promise. And I kept it. After Lin Wei died, I was 32 years old, a widow with an 8-year-old son and almost no money. The factory gave me a small pension for Lin Wei's years of service, but it was not enough to survive on. I took every job I could find. I cleaned offices at night. I washed dishes in restaurant kitchens. I continued sewing and mending, my reputation growing until I had more work than I could handle. I slept 4 or 5 hours a night for years. I wore the same 3 outfits in rotation until they were more patches than original fabric. I ate the cheapest rice and vegetables, saving every bit of meat and fish for my son. I learned to live on so little that even now, decades later, I cannot break the habit of turning off lights immediately when leaving a room or reusing tea bags multiple times. But June thrived. He was bright and curious, eager to learn. I made sure his school fees were always paid on time. I bought him books from the second-hand market and sat with him every evening, helping with homework even though my own education had been limited. When he showed an aptitude for mathematics and science, I found a tutor we could barely afford, cutting my own meals back to 2 per day to make room in the budget. The other mothers in our building sometimes whispered about me. How I was pushing my son too hard. How I was living vicariously through him. How I should remarry and find someone to take care of us both. But I did not care what they said. I knew what I was doing. I was building a ladder out of poverty, rung by painful rung, and my son would be the one to climb it. When June received his acceptance letter to a prestigious university, I wept for an entire evening. All those years of sacrifice, all those nights of exhaustion, all those moments when I thought I might break under the weight of responsibility, they had led to this. My son would be educated. He would have opportunities one could never have dreamed of. He would escape the cycle that had trapped my family for generations. But university was expensive. Even with his scholarship covering tuition, there were fees for housing, books, transportation, food. The amount was staggering. I looked at the numbers and felt my old enemy, fear, creeping back. How could I possibly earn enough? I took more jobs. I worked from dawn until late at night, sleeping in brief snatches between shifts. I aged a decade in those 4 years while June was at university. My back began to ache from the constant labor. My hands became gnarled from sewing and scrubbing. My eyes grew weak from working in dim light to save electricity costs. But I never told June how hard it was. When he came home during holidays, I made sure there was good food on the table. I listened to his stories about classes and friends, smiling and encouraging, hiding my exhaustion. I wanted him to focus on his studies, not to worry about me or feel guilty about the cost of his education. He graduated with honors. Top of his class. The pride I felt was beyond words. My son, the boy I had raised alone, had become an accomplished young man with a promising future. Every sacrifice had been worth it. He found a good job quickly, his university reputation opening doors. Within a year, he was earning more money than I had made in a decade of brutal labor. He wanted to help me financially, to repay me for everything I had done, but I refused. I told him to save his money, to build his own future, to invest in his career. The truth was, I had been saving and investing carefully throughout his university years. Not large amounts, but steady, disciplined contributions to accounts he knew nothing about. Because I had learned something during those years of poverty. I had learned that financial security was not just about having enough money to survive. It was about having enough to be free from fear, to make choices based on values rather than desperation. And I had sworn I would achieve that security for myself, so I would never be dependent or vulnerable again. By the time June was 25 and established in his career, I had accumulated a substantial nest egg. I owned my apartment outright, having purchased it years earlier when prices were low. I had investments that generated steady returns. I had enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life, to travel if I wished, to help June if he ever needed it. But I told no one about this. Not even June. Because I also learned something else during those hard years. I learned that people treat you differently based on what they think you have to offer. I had watched wealthy women in the neighborhood receive deference and respect, while poor women like me were dismissed and overlooked. I had seen how money changed relationships, how it created expectations and resentments. So I kept my financial security private. I continued to live modestly, dressing simply, maintaining my old habits of thrift and caution. To the outside world, I was still Mei Lin the widow, Mei Lin who had struggled to raise her son alone, Mei Lin who probably survived on a meager pension. And when June told me he was going to marry Jia, that fear came rushing back with suffocating intensity. I had met Jia several times during their courtship. She was beautiful, educated, from a good family. She was polite to me, respectful, saying all the right things. But I could not shake the feeling that she saw me as an obstacle rather than a blessing. The way her eyes would flicker with impatience when June mentioned me. The way she would subtly redirect conversations away from topics related to my life or opinions. The way she spoke about her own career and ambitions, with no apparent interest in anything beyond her own sphere. I tried to push my doubts aside. I told myself I was being overprotective, that no woman would ever seem good enough for my son. I attended their wedding with a smile, gave a gracious speech, welcomed her into our family with genuine warmth. But the fear persisted. And it grew stronger when I began hearing stories from other mothers. My friend Hui told me how her daughter-in-law had convinced her son to move to another city, separating Hui from her only child. Another friend, Ling, described how she had been made to feel unwelcome in her son's home, how her daughter-in-law criticized everything she did, how she now saw her grandchildren only a few times a year. Yet another friend, May, wept as she recounted how her daughter-in-law had persuaded her son to place her in a nursing home, despite her good health and desire to remain independent. These were not cruel women or terrible daughters-in-law, my friends insisted. They were normal young women who simply did not understand, who saw their mothers-in-law as burdens or competitors rather than family members deserving of love and respect. The stories haunted me. I would lie awake at night, imagining similar futures for myself. Would Jia slowly push me out of June's life? Would I become an occasional guest, tolerated but not wanted? Would I spend my final years alone, despite having sacrificed everything to raise a son who loved me? These fears consumed me, growing darker and more insistent with each passing month. And that was when the idea first took root. The idea of testing Jia. The idea of discovering her true character before it was too late to protect myself. I knew it was manipulative. I knew it was based on fear rather than evidence. But I also knew that once patterns were established in a household, they were nearly impossible to change. If Jia learned to disrespect me now, if she discovered she could marginalize me without consequence, the dynamic would only deepen over time. So I chose to know the truth, even if the method of discovery was questionable. Even if it meant deceiving my own son. Even if it meant putting Jia in an unfair position. Looking back now, lying in this narrow bed in my son's apartment, I wonder if my own trauma created the very situation I feared. If by pretending to be weak and needy, I brought out the worst in Jia rather than giving her a chance to show her best. If my test was not really about her character at all, but about my own inability to trust after years of having to be strong alone. But these thoughts come too late. The machinery is already in motion. The test has begun. And all I can do now is watch it unfold and hope that whatever truth emerges is one we can all survive. I think about Lin Wei often these days. I wonder what he would say about what I am doing. Would he be proud that I am trying to protect our son? Or would he be disappointed that I have chosen fear over faith, manipulation over honest communication? Sometimes, in my darkest moments, I think he would be ashamed of me. The woman he married was brave and straightforward, someone who faced difficulties head-on. This woman I have become, hiding behind false poverty and feigned weakness, would be unrecognizable to him. But then I remember the promise I made to him as he lay dying. To give June every opportunity. To do whatever was necessary. And I tell myself that this test, this painful deception, is just another form of protection. Another way of ensuring my son's happiness and security. The morning light has grown brighter now. I hear movement in the apartment, Jia waking, the sound of water running as she prepares for her day. Soon I will need to rise and continue my performance. Soon I will shuffle out of my room with my practiced limp, grimace as if my back pains me, speak in the soft, uncertain voice of someone who has grown old before her time. But for these last few moments, I allow myself to be Mei Lin. The real Mei Lin. The woman who survived everything life threw at her. The The woman who built a future for her son with her bare hands and unbreakable will. That woman is still here, underneath the disguise. And she is watching. Always watching. The change was gradual enough that I almost missed it. Like ice forming on a pond, so thin at first you can barely see it, but growing thicker and more dangerous with each passing night. Gia's true feelings began emerging in small, careful ways. Ways she could deny if confronted. Ways my son would never notice because they only appeared when he was absent. It started with the finances. About 6 weeks after I moved in, Gia began making comments about expenses. Casual remarks, delivered with a light tone that did not quite mask the sharpness underneath. She mentioned how the water bill had increased since I arrived, laughing as she said it but letting the observation hang in the air like an accusation. She noted that the grocery costs had risen substantially, that feeding 3 people was so much more expensive than she had anticipated. I offered to contribute. I had prepared for this, setting aside cash in small denominations, money that would seem like a significant sacrifice from someone living on a minimal pension. I presented it to her one afternoon, explaining it was all I could spare for my monthly payment, apologizing that it was not more. She took the money with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Oh, Mother Mei Lin, you do not have to do this. I know how tight things are for you." But her fingers closed around the bills quickly, and there was something in her expression that made my stomach turn. A satisfaction. A small victory claimed. After that, the comments about money became more frequent. She began mentioning specific costs associated with my presence. The extra electricity for my room. The special foods I supposedly needed for my delicate health. The increased laundry. Each item was presented as a fact, not a complaint, but the accumulation created a narrative. I was expensive. I was a drain. My presence cost them more than I could ever repay. My son heard none of this. When he was home, Gia was all warmth and generosity. She would insist that I not worry about money, that they were happy to provide for me, that family took care of each other. She performed her role as the devoted daughter-in-law so convincingly that June would often thank her, pulling her close and telling her how grateful he was that she treated his mother so well. And I would watch this performance, my stomach knotting with confusion and anger. Which version was real? The resentful woman who calculated my cost down to the extra toilet paper I used? Or the generous one who smiled at my son and claimed to be happy I was there? The second area where Gia's mask began to slip was around my health. I had fabricated various ailments as part of my disguise. A bad back that required rest. Weak knees that made climbing stairs difficult. Occasional dizzy spells that meant I should not go out alone. These invented problems were meant to make me seem vulnerable and in need of accommodation. But Gia began to question them in ways that felt less like concern and more like interrogation. She would ask detailed questions about my symptoms, her tone sympathetic but her eyes sharp and skeptical. When did the pain start exactly? Had I seen a doctor recently? What specific diagnosis had I received? Did I have medical records she could review, just to make sure we were managing my conditions properly? I deflected as best I could, giving vague answers, claiming that I had seen doctors years ago but could not quite remember all the details, that I managed my pain with rest and over-the-counter medications. Each evasion seemed to increase her suspicion. One afternoon, when June was at work, she sat down across from me at the dining table with a cup of tea and a determined expression. "Mother Mei Lin, I have been thinking. We should take you to see a good doctor. Get a complete checkup. Make sure we understand exactly what you are dealing with so we can take proper care of you." Her words were kind, but the way she watched me as she spoke made my heart race. This was a test within my test. A challenge. If I agreed, I would have to face a medical professional who would find nothing actually wrong with me. If I refused, I would seem ungrateful or hiding something. "I am sure that is not necessary," I said carefully. "I have lived with these problems for so long. I know how to manage them. But what if there is something we are missing? What if you need treatment you are not getting? We want to help you, Mother Mei Lin. We want you to be as healthy as possible." The emphasis on the word help felt pointed. I realized she was building another narrative. If I refused medical care, she could tell June and others that I was being difficult, that she tried to help me but I would not cooperate. Either way, she positioned herself as the caring one and me as the problem. "I will think about it," I said finally, knowing this was only a temporary escape. She smiled and nodded, but I saw the flash of frustration in her eyes. She wanted to push harder, to force the issue, but she was not quite ready to drop her facade of patience and concern. The third area where cracks appeared was in family decisions. At first, Jia would consult me about small household matters. What did I think about this brand of rice versus that one? Did I prefer the curtains open or closed during the day? Simple questions that made me feel included. But gradually, these consultations stopped. Decisions were made without my input, even about things that directly affected me. The time for dinner shifted to accommodate Jia's work schedule, becoming later than I found comfortable, but no one asked if this suited me. The television in the living room, which I sometimes watched in the afternoon, was moved to their bedroom because Jia wanted to reorganize the space. Again, no discussion. When I mildly mentioned these changes, expressing a preference or asking if we might compromise, Jia would respond with exaggerated understanding followed by explanations of why the change was necessary. "Oh, I am so sorry, Mother Mei Lin. I did not realize the dinner time was difficult for you. But you see, I have these video calls with international clients, and this is the only time that works. You understand, do you not? Your needs are important, but we also have to think about what works for everyone." The words were reasonable, but the pattern was clear. My preferences did not actually matter. I was expected to adapt to their lives, not the other way around. I was a guest being tolerated, not a family member being valued. And the most painful part was watching my son miss all of this. When he was present, Jia made a show of asking my opinion. She would turn to me during conversations and solicit my thoughts, appearing genuinely interested. She would defer to me on small decisions, making me seem included and respected. But I knew the truth. These performances were for Jun's benefit. They were designed to maintain his belief that his wife and his mother had a good relationship, that everyone was happy, that he was a lucky man whose family all got along. I began to feel like I was losing my mind. The version of reality that Jun experienced was so different from my daily life that I started questioning my own perceptions. Was I being overly sensitive? Was I seeing malice where there was only normal adjustment friction? Was my test causing me to interpret innocent actions as proof of Jia's bad character? But then there were moments that left no room for doubt. Like the afternoon I answered the phone when one of Jun's aunts called. We had a lovely conversation, catching up on family news, and I mentioned how kind Jia had been, not wanting to cause any family drama by complaining. After I hung up, Jia emerged from her office where she had apparently been listening. Her face was tight with anger. Her voice, when she spoke, had lost all its usual warmth. "In the future, please let me know when family members call. I prefer to speak with them first before you do." I was startled by her tone. Of course. I did not realize. I thought it would be fine to just chat with her. It is not about what is fine. It is about respecting boundaries in this household. You are living here as our guest, and there are ways things should be done. The word guest hit me like a slap. Not family member. Not mother. Guest. A temporary presence, someone who could be asked to leave if she did not follow the rules. I apologized, keeping my voice soft and meek, playing my role of the elderly woman who meant no harm. But inside, I was reeling. This was the real Jia, the one she hid from my son. This was the woman who resented my presence, who saw me as an intrusion, who was already establishing a hierarchy where she held all the power. That night, I lay in my bed listening to them in their room. I could not hear specific words, but I recognized the rhythm of their conversation. Jia was telling him something, her voice animated, occasionally rising with emphasis. Jun's responses were shorter, his tone soothing. I imagined her complaining about me, framing the phone call as evidence of my overstepping, and him reassuring her that everything was fine, probably telling her she was too stressed and imagining problems that did not exist. The next morning, Jun came to my room before leaving for work. He sat on the edge of my bed, his face concerned. "Mom, Jia mentioned you seemed a bit confused yesterday. Mixing up some communication protocols. Are you feeling okay? Is your memory bothering you?" I stared at him, struggling to process what I was hearing. She had not just complained about me. She had framed it as a sign of cognitive decline, as evidence that I was not just annoying but actually failing mentally. This was more strategic than I had imagined possible. She was not just positioning herself as the suffering daughter-in-law. She was positioning me as someone who might need even more care, more supervision, more control. "I am fine, June. Just still learning how things work here." I will be more careful. He patted my hand, his face relaxing. Okay, good. Just wanted to check. You would tell me if something was wrong, right? I smiled and nodded, and he left for work, satisfied. But I felt something shift inside me. A hardening. A recognition that this situation was more dangerous than I had anticipated. Because Jia was not just a young woman struggling to adjust to living with a mother-in-law. She was actively working to undermine me, to position herself as the reasonable one and me as the burden. She was building a case, fact by fact, that would eventually justify whatever she wanted to do with me. And my son, good man that he was, believed her completely. The weeks continued, and the pattern intensified. Jia's kindness in front of June, her coldness when we were alone. Her public praise of me to relatives and friends, her private complaints about my limitations and costs. Her smiling inclusion of me in family activities, her subtle exclusion from anything that mattered. I found myself spending more and more time in my small room, avoiding the common areas, trying to be invisible. This was partly my role, the frail elderly woman who needed rest. But it was also self-protection. Every interaction with Jia felt like navigating a minefield. I never knew which version of her I would encounter, and the unpredictability was exhausting. I also began to notice how she controlled information flowing to and from the household. When friends or family asked about me, she would answer with carefully constructed responses that painted a picture of a failing, confused old woman who was lucky to have such patient caregivers. When I spoke to these same people, I could hear their voices change, becoming slower and louder, as if I could not understand normal speech. Jia had trained them to see me as diminished. She also controlled my son's perception by timing her complaints perfectly. She would wait until he was tired or stressed from work, then mention small incidents that made me seem difficult or confused. Nothing major enough to alarm him, but a steady drip of negative information that was slowly poisoning his image of me. I realized I had made a terrible miscalculation. I had thought my test would reveal Jia's character quickly and clearly. Good or bad. Kind or cruel. Simple. But people are not simple. And Jia was skilled at playing multiple roles simultaneously, showing different faces to different audiences. My test had not revealed her true character. It had created a complex game where we were both performing, both manipulating, both trying to control the narrative. And somewhere in the middle of this game was my son, loving us both, trusting us both, completely unaware that his household had become a battleground. I thought about ending the test. Just revealing the truth and dealing with the consequences. But I knew that if I did that now, I would be the villain. The manipulative mother-in-law who had deceived everyone, who had tested her daughter-in-law with cruel games. Jia would be vindicated, positioned as the victim of my schemes. And my relationship with June would be damaged, perhaps beyond repair. So I was trapped. Caught in a situation of my own making, unable to move forward or back without destroying everything. The mask had slipped. I had seen what lay beneath Jia's performance. But I had no idea what to do with that knowledge. No idea how to protect myself or my relationship with my son. No idea how this test would end. All I knew was that something was building toward a breaking point. And when it came, the explosion would be devastating for all of us. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 months after I had moved in with June and Jia. It was for a family gathering, a celebration of my late husband's brother's 70th birthday. The extended family would be there, cousins and relatives I had not seen in months, all coming together for a meal at a local restaurant. June was excited about it. He told me how much he looked forward to me seeing everyone again, how they all asked about me constantly, how this would be a wonderful opportunity for Jia to connect more deeply with my side of the family. I smiled and agreed, but dread settled in my stomach like a stone. Because I knew what these gatherings were like. Questions would be asked. Observations would be made. My fabricated frailty would be on display, and Jia would have an audience for her performance as the devoted daughter-in-law caring for a difficult mother-in-law. The days leading up to the gathering were tense. Jia was unusually quiet, her face tight with an emotion I could not quite identify. Stress, perhaps. Or anticipation. She spent extra time on her appearance that week, buying a new outfit, getting her hair done professionally. She was preparing for something. On the day of the celebration, I dressed in my worn, outdated clothes as my role required. I had to maintain the illusion of poverty and struggle. But I found myself wishing desperately that I could wear one of the beautiful outfits I had left in storage, that I could show up as myself, as the capable woman I actually was. We arrived at the restaurant to find the private room already filling with relatives. The greetings were warm, people embracing me, exclaiming how long it had been. But I noticed how their eyes scanned my appearance, noting my shabby clothes, my apparent aging, the way I moved slowly and carefully as if every step pained me. And I saw Jia watching their reactions, a small satisfied smile playing at the corners of her mouth. The meal began well enough. Food was served, conversations flowed, laughter filled the room. I sat between June and his cousin, participating in discussions, enjoying the familiar warmth of family. For a little while, I could almost forget the complicated web I had woven around myself. But then the questions started. June's aunt, a woman I had always been close with, leaned across the table with concern in her eyes. Mei Lin, we have heard you have been having health troubles. How are you managing? Before I could answer, Jia's voice cut in, sweet and concerned. Oh, it has been challenging. Mother Mei Lin has so many issues with her back, her knees, her memory sometimes. We are doing our best to care for her, but it requires constant attention. The table went quiet for a moment. I felt heat rising in my face. Memory. I had never claimed memory problems. That was Jia's addition, her own embellishment of my fabricated ailments. My memory is fine, I said softly, trying to laugh it off. Just the normal aches and pains of getting older. But Jia continued, her voice dripping with sympathetic patience. She sometimes gets confused about conversations we have had. Forgets what we have told her about household routines. We have to explain things multiple times. But it is okay. We understand it is part of aging. I stared at her, speechless. She was doing this deliberately. In front of my entire family, she was painting me as not just physically frail but mentally declining. And she was doing it with such apparent concern that no one would dare accuse her of being cruel. June, oblivious to the undercurrents, put his hand on Jia's shoulder. She has been amazing, Mom. So patient with you. I am really lucky. The conversation moved on, but the damage was done. I could see the changed expressions on my relatives' faces. Pity. Concern. The look people give when they think someone is losing their mental faculties. Several of them began speaking to me more slowly, more simply, as if I were a child. And through it all, Jia sat with a small smile, playing the role of the martyred daughter-in-law to perfection. But worse was yet to come. Later in the meal, after several rounds of drinks had been served, one of June's uncles raised his glass for a toast. He spoke about family, about the importance of taking care of our elders, about how proud he was to see the younger generation honoring their responsibilities. Then he turned specifically to Jia. We are all so impressed by how you have taken in your mother-in-law, how you care for her despite the burden it must be. Not many young women these days would make such sacrifices. You are truly exemplary. The room murmured agreement. People raised their glasses to Jia, praising her generosity and patience. And something inside me snapped. Perhaps it was the word burden, said so casually, as if my presence in my son's life was something to be endured rather than valued. Perhaps it was seeing Jia's performance rewarded and celebrated while I sat there in my shabby clothes, playing a role that was destroying any dignity I had left. Perhaps it was the accumulation of months of subtle cruelty, of being erased and diminished and controlled. I do not think I am that much of a burden, I said quietly. The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at me. June's uncle, flustered, tried to recover. Oh, of course not, Mei Lin. I did not mean it that way. I just meant that it is wonderful how Jia cares for you. But Jia's face had transformed. Her smile was gone, replaced by something cold and hard. Oh, Mother Mei Lin. Do not be modest. We all know how difficult things have been. She turned to the table, her voice still sweet but with an edge underneath. The truth is, it has been very challenging. The financial strain alone is significant. And having to arrange everything around Mother Mei Lin's needs, her appointments, her limitations. I am not complaining, of course. Family is family. But let us not pretend it is easy. The words hung in the air like poison gas. I felt tears pricking at my eyes, humiliation burning through my body. She had just publicly declared me a financial and emotional burden in front of my entire family. And she had done it with such apparent reluctance, such false modesty, that she still looked like the suffering saint. June shifted uncomfortably beside me. Jia, I think you have had a bit too much to drink. Let us not talk about this now. But Jia was not done. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on mine with an intensity that terrified me. I am sorry, Mother Mei Lin, if the truth hurts. But maybe if you had planned better for your old age, if you had saved money instead of spending everything, if you had made better choices, we would not all be in this position. We love you, of course. But love does not pay bills. Love does not give me back my privacy and freedom. Love does not erase the fact that my life has become significantly harder since you moved in. The room was frozen. No one seemed to breathe. I saw shock on the faces around the table, saw some relatives looking at Jia with confusion and disapproval, saw others nodding slightly as if she had given voice to thoughts they had also had. And I saw my son's face, torn between defending me and supporting his wife, unable to process what was happening. I stood up slowly, every eye following my movement. My hands were shaking, but I kept my voice steady. I think I need some air. Excuse me. I walked out of the private room, through the restaurant, into the cold evening. Behind me, I heard June calling my name, heard raised voices beginning to argue, heard the gathering dissolving into uncomfortable chaos. I stood on the sidewalk, wrapped my thin coat around my body, and let the tears come. This was my breaking point. The moment when my test had gone from uncomfortable to unbearable. The moment when I realized that by pretending to be weak and needy, I had given Jia permission to treat me as exactly that. I had invited her contempt. I had enabled her cruelty. And worst of all, I had no one to blame but myself. June found me a few minutes later, his face stricken with confusion and concern. He put his jacket around my shoulders and stood beside me, not speaking at first, just being present. Finally he said, "Mom, I am so sorry. I do not know what happened. Jia has been under a lot of stress at work, and she had too much to drink tonight. She did not mean those things. But I knew she did." Every word had been true from her perspective. I was a burden she resented. And she had finally said so publicly, dropping her mask in a moment of alcohol-loosened anger. "June," I said slowly, "do you think I am a burden?" He looked at me with such genuine confusion that I almost believed his answer before he gave it. "What? No, of course not. You are my mother. Having you close is a blessing, not a burden. But Jia does not feel that way." He was quiet for a long moment. "She is just adjusting. It is a big change, having someone else in the house. But she loves you. She tells me all the time how much she respects you, how honored she is to care for you." I did not argue. What was the point? He believed what he wanted to believe, or what he needed to believe to maintain his picture of a harmonious family. The ride home was silent. Jia did not come with us. She had stayed behind at the restaurant, probably explaining to everyone how difficult I was, how her patience had finally worn thin, how she was only human and sometimes the strain showed. When we arrived at the apartment, June helped me to my room, his movements gentle but his face troubled. He left me alone, closing the door softly, and I heard him go to the living room, presumably to wait for Jia to return. I lay on my narrow bed in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The test had reached its conclusion. I had seen Jia's true character, and it was exactly what I had feared. She did not honor me. She did not respect me. She saw me as an obligation and a burden, something to be tolerated and eventually escaped. But I also realized something else. My test had not been fair. I had entered her life as a fabrication, a false version of myself that was designed to be burdensome. I had created the very situation I claimed to be testing. How could she possibly pass a test where the conditions were rigged against her from the start? And more troubling still, what had my test revealed about my own character? That I was manipulative. That I was so afraid of being hurt that I hurt others first. That I valued control more than trust. I heard Jia return an hour later. Heard the low, intense conversation between her and June in the living room. Could not make out words, but recognized the tones. Her defensive, perhaps tearful. His confused and trying to mediate. The conversation went on for a long time. When silence finally fell, I continued to lie awake, knowing that everything had changed. The test was over, but the damage was real. And I had no idea how to move forward from this moment. Tomorrow, I told myself, I would think about what to do. Tomorrow, I would figure out how to untangle this mess. But tonight, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what I had created. The pain. The humiliation. The recognition that in trying to protect myself from being hurt, I had guaranteed that everyone would be wounded. The breaking point had been reached. And now we would all have to live with the shattered pieces. In the days after the family gathering, something unexpected began to happen. The power dynamics I thought were fixed started shifting in ways I had not anticipated. The public humiliation that should have been my final defeat became, instead, the beginning of a transformation. It started with June's cousin, the one I had sat beside during the dinner. She called me 2 days later, her voice warm with concern. "Aunt Mei Lin, I just wanted to check on you. What happened at the dinner, the way Jia spoke to you, it was inappropriate. A lot of us were very upset about it." I was surprised. In my shame and pain, I had assumed everyone would side with Jia, would see me as the burden she had described. But it seemed her outburst had revealed something people found disturbing. Over the next week, several other relatives reached out. Some called. Some stopped by the apartment when they knew June would be at work, bringing small gifts and asking pointed questions about how I was being treated. Word had spread through the family, and the interpretation was not what Jia had intended. Instead of seeing her as a martyred daughter-in-law finally speaking truth, many saw her as cruel and disrespectful. The way she had spoken about finances, the implications about my poor planning, the public shaming of an elder, all of this violated deep cultural values about how one should treat family members, especially parents. June's aunt, the one I had always been closest with, was particularly direct. She came to visit on a Thursday afternoon, and Jia was forced to entertain her politely before my aunt insisted on speaking with me privately in my room. Once the door was closed, she pulled her chair close to my bed and took my hands in hers. "Mei Lin, I need you to be honest with me. Are they treating you well here? Are you safe? Are you happy?" The questions pierced through my careful facade. I wanted to pour everything out to her, to confess my test and my pain and my confusion. But I held back, uncertain what the consequences would be. "I am fine," I said carefully. "Jia was just having a difficult night." My aunt's eyes narrowed. "I have known you for 40 years, Mei Lin. Do not lie to me. That woman does not respect you." The way she spoke, the things she said, that was not a momentary lapse. That was built-up resentment finally showing itself. She paused, studying my face. "And another thing. I remember you from before June went to university. You were so strong, so capable. You ran your own life, managed everything yourself. When did you become this frail person who can barely function? It does not make sense to me." My heart hammered in my chest. She was seeing through my performance. After months of fooling everyone, my aunt's sharp eyes were detecting the truth. "People age," I said weakly. "Health declines. Not this quickly. Not this completely." She leaned even closer. "Mei Lin, what are you not telling me?" For a long moment, I considered confessing everything. But fear held me back. If I revealed my test now, after the public incident, it would make everything worse. I would be exposed as manipulative and Jia would be vindicated in her resentment. "I am just tired," I finally said. "Tired of being a burden," as Jia said. Maybe she was right. Maybe I should have planned better. My aunt made a dismissive sound. "That girl knows nothing about your life, about what you have been through. Do not let her words define your value." She stood to leave, but paused at the door. "If you need anything, if things become difficult, you call me immediately. You understand? You do not have to endure disrespect in the name of family harmony." After she left, I sat in my room feeling shaken. The way my family was rallying around me, defending me, showing concern, this was changing something fundamental. I was no longer isolated. I was no longer alone in my struggle with Jia. And Jia knew it. I could see the shift in her behavior. She was noticeably more careful around me now, aware that people were watching, that her reputation had been damaged. She was polite, almost excessively so, performing her kindness with obvious effort. But underneath the performance, I sensed her anger growing. She had tried to establish dominance, to publicly claim her victimhood, and it had backfired. Instead of sympathy, she had earned disapproval. And she blamed me for this outcome. June was caught in the middle, increasingly stressed by the family tensions. He tried to smooth things over, assuring his relatives that everything was fine, that the incident had been blown out of proportion, that Jia and I were getting along well. But I could see the doubt beginning to creep into his eyes. The questions forming. the slow recognition that perhaps his household was not as harmonious as he had believed. 2 weeks after the gathering, something happened that changed everything again. I was in my room when I heard June's voice rise with shock in the living room. I opened my door slightly to listen. "Mom has been paying my student loans? This entire time?" There was a long silence. Then Gia's voice, confused and defensive. "What are you talking about?" June's voice shook with emotion. "I just got a notification from the loan company. Apparently, someone has been making payments on my account for years. Large payments. I called to ask who it was, and they said the payments came from Mei Lin Zhang. My mother has been paying off my loans, thousands of dollars, and she never told me." My blood went cold. I had forgotten about those payments. Years ago, when June had started his career, I had quietly begun contributing to his loan repayments, wanting to ease his burden without him knowing. The payments came from an account in my name, automatically transferred each month. I had not thought about them in ages, had not considered that June might discover them. I heard Gia's voice again, sharper now. "That does not make sense. She told us she is barely surviving on her pension. Where would she get that kind of money?" "I do not know." June sounded bewildered. "Unless she has been lying about her financial situation." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. I closed my door quietly and sat on my bed, my hands trembling. The test was unraveling. The careful construction I had built was beginning to collapse, and I had no control over how it would fall. Over the next few days, I could feel June watching me differently, assessing me. He did not confront me directly, but he started asking subtle questions. How was I managing financially? Was I sure I did not need help? Where exactly did my pension come from? I deflected as I had before, but I could see the doubt growing in his eyes. And I could see Gia's increasing nervousness. If I had money, if I had been deceiving them about my poverty, what else had I been lying about? And what did that mean about her treatment of me? She became almost frantic in her kindness, as if trying to erase months of subtle cruelty. She cooked my favorite meals. She asked constantly about my comfort. She insisted on taking me to appointments I did not actually need, making a show of her attentiveness where others could witness it. But it was too late. The narrative was shifting, and she could feel control slipping away from her. The real turning point came when one of the neighbors, an elderly woman who lived down the hall, stopped June one evening as he was coming home from work. I heard about the conversation later from June himself, his face troubled as he recounted it to Jia in their bedroom, not realizing I could hear through the thin walls. "Mrs. Chen told me something strange today. She said she used to see Mom regularly at the community center, that Mom used to organize activities and help coordinate programs. She said Mom was always energetic and capable, that she had a leadership role. She asked me why Mom had declined so quickly, whether something serious had happened." There was a pause. Then Gia's voice, tight with tension. "Maybe Mrs. Chen is remembering wrong. Old people get confused about these things." But June's voice was thoughtful. "Maybe. But it is strange, is it not? How Mom seems different here than how people remember her. And now this thing about the loan payments. I feel like I am missing something." Another silence. I could almost feel Gia's desperation from where I sat in my room. "I think," June continued slowly, "that I need to understand my mother's actual situation better. Her real financial status. Her real health. Something does not add up." That night, I lay awake knowing that the test was nearly over. One way or another, the truth would emerge soon. And when it did, everyone would have to face what we had become. The power had shifted. I was no longer the weak, dependent figure Jia had been managing and containing. Doubt had been cast on my entire presentation. My family was watching protectively. My son was asking questions. And Jia, who had thought herself in control, was discovering that power in families is more complex than simple dominance. That truth has a way of surfacing. That reputations can shift overnight. But as I lay there in the darkness, I felt no triumph. Only a growing dread about what would happen when all the lies finally collapsed, when all the performances ended, when we all had to face each other without our masks. The storm was coming, and none of us were prepared for its force. The confrontation came on a Saturday morning in late winter, 3 weeks after June had discovered the loan payments. The apartment was gray with weak sunlight, the kind of light that reveals every flaw and leaves nowhere to hide. I woke to the sound of intense voices in the living room. Not quite shouting, but urgent and strained. I lay still for a moment, listening, my heart already racing with the knowledge that something irreversible was about to happen. Then June knocked on my door. His face, when I opened it, was a mixture of emotions I could not fully read. Determination, hurt, confusion. Mom, we need to talk. All of us. Please come to the living room. I followed him, my practiced limp suddenly feeling absurd, a costume I no longer wanted to wear. Jia sat on the sofa, her face pale, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. June gestured for me to sit in the armchair, then stood between us like a referee preparing for a difficult match. I need both of you to be completely honest with me. He looked at me first. Mom, I have been doing some investigating. I called your bank. I spoke with Mrs. Chen at the community center. I even called some of your old friends. My stomach dropped. I said nothing, waiting. You are not poor, are you? You have substantial savings. You own your apartment. You have investments. The whole story about struggling financially, about barely surviving on your pension, it was not true. Was it? The moment stretched. I could deny it. I could continue the lie a little longer. But I was suddenly, desperately tired of pretending. No, I said quietly. It was not true. Jia's sharp intake of breath was audible. June's face transformed, shock and hurt flooding across his features. Why? His voice cracked on the word. Why would you lie about something like that? Why would you make us think you were struggling when you were not? And there it was. The question I had been dreading since the day I conceived this test. The moment where I would have to explain the inexplicable, justify the unjustifiable. I was afraid, I began, my voice barely above a whisper. I was afraid of being treated badly, of being seen as a burden. I wanted to know if I would be valued for myself, not for what I could provide. June stared at me as if I had become a stranger. So you tested us? You created this whole false identity to test how we would treat you? To test me, Jia said, her voice shaking with anger. You were testing me. This whole time, you were watching and judging, setting me up to fail. I turned to look at her directly for the first time. Her face was flushed, tears pooling in her eyes, her entire body rigid with emotion. I was not trying to set you up to fail, I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I wondered if they were true. I just needed to know. Know what? Jia stood abruptly, her voice rising. Know if I was good enough? If I met your standards? If I deserved your precious son? June held up his hand. Jia, please. Let Mom explain. But Jia was not stopping. 3 months. 3 months I have been trying to take care of you, worrying about money, arranging my life around your supposed needs. And all of it was fake. You were watching me struggle and judging me the whole time. Her voice broke. Do you have any idea how that feels? To discover that someone you were trying to care for was actually conducting some kind of twisted experiment on you? I felt tears on my own face now. I am sorry. I was wrong. I let my fear make me cruel. Cruel, Jia repeated, the word bitter. Yes. That is exactly the word. You were cruel. You put me in an impossible situation and then condemned me for how I handled it. But you did handle it badly, I said, my own anger finally surfacing. You resented me. You complained about me constantly. You humiliated me at that family dinner. Because I thought you were actually poor. Jia shouted. Because I thought we were actually struggling to support you. Yes, I resented the financial burden. Yes, I struggled with a loss of privacy and freedom. But those were real reactions to what I believed was a real situation. How dare you judge me for being human? The words hit me like physical blows. She was right. Every resentment I had documented, every cold moment I had catalogued as evidence of her bad character, they were all reactions to a situation I had artificially created. June sank down onto the coffee table, his head in his hands. I cannot believe this. Both of you. These games. These lies. He looked up at me, and I saw something in his eyes that terrified me. Disappointment. The kind that comes when you discover a parent is not who you thought they were. Mom, I thought you were better than this. I thought you taught me to be honest, to communicate directly, to trust people. But instead, you came into our home with lies and manipulation. His words shattered something inside me. This was my fear realized, not that Jia would mistreat me, but that my son would lose respect for me, that I would fall from the pedestal of his love. And you, he turned to Jia, you have been complaining about mom to me for months. Subtle things, little comments, but they added up. You were building a case against her, making me see her as difficult and declining. Jia's face crumpled. I was frustrated. I was struggling. I needed to vent to someone. But you were not just venting. You were shaping how I saw my mother. Whether you meant to or not, you were creating distance between us. I was not, Jia protested, but her voice lacked conviction. The three of us sat in heavy silence. All the secrets were now exposed, all the performances stripped away. And what remained was ugly and painful and true. Finally, I spoke, my voice hoarse. I was wrong to test you. Both of you. I let my fear control me, and I created exactly the situation I was afraid of. I looked at Jia directly. You resented me partly because of who I pretended to be. And I judged you for reactions that were actually reasonable given what you believed. We have both been responding to lies. Jia wiped her eyes, not speaking. But I also saw things that were real. The way you controlled information about me to others. The way you positioned yourself as superior. The way you spoke to me differently when June was not around. Those things happened regardless of whether I was actually poor. Jia was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. You are right. I did those things. And I need to be honest about why. She took a shaky breath. I was jealous of you. Of your relationship with June. He loves you so much, respects you so much. And I was afraid I would never measure up, never be as important to him as you are. So I tried to diminish you. To make myself seem more valuable by making you seem less so. Her admission hung in the air, raw and vulnerable. And when I thought you were poor and struggling, I felt superior. I felt like I was the successful one, the one taking care of things. It made me feel powerful in a situation where I otherwise felt inadequate. So yes, I resented you. But I also needed you to be less than me to feel secure. June looked at his wife with surprise and pain. Jia, I had no idea you felt that way. Because I was ashamed of it, she said. What kind of person is jealous of their husband's mother? What kind of person needs someone else to be weak so they can feel strong? We sat with these confessions, the truth finally exposed in all its complicated ugliness. No one was simply right or simply wrong. We had all been acting from fear, from insecurity, from wounds we carried that had nothing to do with each other. June finally spoke, his voice tired. So where do we go from here? How do we move forward from this? I do not know, I admitted. I have broken trust. I do not know how to repair that. Jia looked at me, her eyes red and puffy. And I have been disrespectful and manipulative. I do not know how to fix that either. Maybe, June said slowly, we start by agreeing to stop performing. Stop testing. Stop managing each other's perceptions. Maybe we start by just being honest, even when honesty is uncomfortable. Can we do that? I asked. After all this? We have to try, June said. Because the alternative is for this family to break apart completely. He stood, looking exhausted. I need some time to process all of this. I am going for a walk. When I come back, I want us to start fresh. No more lies. No more games. Just truth, however difficult. He left the apartment, the door closing softly behind him. Jia and I sat in silence, the air thick with everything that had been said. Finally, she spoke. For what it is worth, I am sorry. For the things I said at the dinner. For the way I treated you. Even if the situation was not what I thought, my behavior was still wrong. I nodded. I am sorry too. For everything. For the test. For not giving you a fair chance. For letting my fear hurt you. We sat together in that broken space, two women who had wounded each other, who had been wounded by circumstance and by their own choices. The truth was unleashed now, ugly and liberating and terrifying all at once. And we had no idea if what remained of our family could survive it. The weeks that followed the confrontation were strange and uncertain, like learning to walk again after a long illness. Nothing was easy. Nothing was comfortable. But slowly, in small and painful increments, we began to find our way towards something real. The first change was mine to make. The day after our explosive conversation, I packed up the worn, shabby clothes that had been my costume. I retrieved several outfits from my storage unit, the ones that actually reflected my taste and style. When I emerged from my room dressed in clothing that fit properly, that looked modern and well-maintained, Jia stared at me with an expression I could not quite read. "You look so different," she said quietly. "This is who I actually am," I replied. "I am sorry you had to meet a fiction first." June came home that evening to find me sitting in the living room reading a book, dressed in normal clothes, not hunched over or moving with exaggerated pain. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the transformation. "It is really over then. The pretending." "It is over," I confirmed. "No more lies." That night, we had our first truly honest dinner. No one performed. No one managed their words carefully. We talked about simple things, the weather, a funny story from June's work, a recipe Jia wanted to try. It was awkward and stilted, like strangers learning how to be comfortable together. But it was real. Jia's path was harder than mine. She had to face not just what she had done, but why she had done it. Her jealousy of my relationship with June, her need to feel superior, her fear of never being good enough, these were wounds she had been carrying long before I entered her household. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after the confrontation, she knocked on my door. When I opened it, she stood there with her arms wrapped around herself, looking young and uncertain. "Can we talk?" I invited her in. She sat on the edge of my bed, the same spot where June used to sit when he was a boy coming to tell me about his day. "I have been thinking about what I said during the fight. About being jealous of you. And I realized it goes deeper than just you and June." She paused, gathering courage. "My own mother and I do not have a good relationship. She was always critical, always disappointed in me. Nothing I did was ever enough. So when I married June and gained a mother-in-law, I think I brought all of that baggage with me. I expected you to be like her. To judge me. To find me lacking." I listened without interrupting, understanding beginning to dawn. "So when you moved in, I was defensive from the start. I saw competition and criticism even when it was not there. And when I thought you were poor and dependent, it felt like proof that I was better, more successful. It was twisted, but it made me feel like maybe I was enough after all." She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I am not making excuses. What I did was wrong. But I want you to understand that it was not really about you. It was about my own broken places." I reached out and took her hand. "We are all carrying broken places. I let mine turn me into someone who tests and manipulates instead of trusts. You let yours turn you into someone who needs others to be less so you can feel like more. Neither of us was our best self." She squeezed my hand. "Can we try again? Start over, knowing each other honestly this time?" "I would like that," I said. "But I need you to be patient with me. I've spent so much of my life being strong and independent that I do not actually know how to let people help me without feeling weak." "And I need you to be patient with me," she replied. "I've spent so much of my life feeling inadequate that I do not know how to accept that someone might actually value me without needing me to prove it constantly." We sat together in that small room, holding hands, two women who had hurt each other beginning the slow process of healing. The change in the household was gradual but unmistakable. Jia began asking my opinion on things, not as performance but because she genuinely wanted to know. What did I think about this career opportunity she was considering? How would I approach a difficult client situation? Could I teach her some of the dishes I used to make for June when he was young? And I began letting her help me with things, small things, learning to accept assistance without feeling diminished. She would bring me tea, and I would thank her without analyzing her motives. She would offer to drive me somewhere, and I would accept instead of insisting I could manage alone. We also began having real conversations, the kind where both people are actually listening instead of planning their next move. She told me about her work, the challenges and rewards, and I found myself genuinely interested in her world. I told her stories about raising June, the funny moments and the difficult ones, and she listened with actual curiosity rather than polite tolerance. June watched these changes with cautious hope. He was still hurt, still processing the betrayal from both of us. But he could see the effort we were making, and he allowed himself to believe in the possibility of something better. One evening about a month after the confrontation, the three of us sat down to dinner and Jia made an announcement. "I talked to my supervisor today. I am going to cut back my hours, shift to a 4-day workweek. The pay cut will be manageable, and it means I will have more time to focus on things that matter." June looked surprised but pleased. What brought this on? Jia glanced at me, then back at him. I realized I have been using work as an escape. Staying busy so I would not have to deal with uncomfortable situations at home. But that just lets problems grow. I want to be more present, more engaged with this family. I felt warmth spreading in my chest. That is a brave choice. She smiled at me, a real smile, not the performative ones I had learned to recognize. I learned it from you. The way you sacrificed and chose what mattered over what was easy. I am trying to figure out what that looks like in my life. I also made a decision. I had my lawyer draft a document outlining my financial assets and my plans for them. I gave copies to both June and Jia, holding nothing back. I want complete transparency. You should know what I have, where it came from, and what I plan to do with it. No more secrets. No more tests. June looked through the documents, his eyes widening as he understood the full extent of what I had accumulated over the years. Mom, this is significant. You could be living so much more comfortably. Why are you staying in this small room, living so simply? Because I do not need much, I said honestly. And because I want to save most of it for you. For your future. For grandchildren someday, if you are blessed with them. Jia looked up sharply. You would do that? Even after everything that happened between us? Especially after everything that happened, I replied. Because I learned that family is not about transactions. It is not about who owes what or who has more power. It is about choosing to love each other even when it is difficult. Even when we fail each other. The healing was not linear. There were still difficult days. Days when old patterns of behavior would resurface, when Jia would slip into controlling mode or I would start calculating and assessing rather than trusting. But the difference now was that we recognized these patterns and called them out, gently reminding each other that we were trying to be better. About 2 months after the confrontation, something shifted in how we referred to each other. Jia stopped calling me Mother Mei Lin in that formal, distant way. She started calling me Mom, tentatively at first, then with increasing comfort. And I began calling her daughter, not out of obligation but because that was what she was becoming to me. We also began developing our own relationship, separate from June. We would have coffee together in the afternoons, just the two of us, talking about everything and nothing. She introduced me to her friends, not as the mother-in-law she was obligated to tolerate, but as someone she actually enjoyed spending time with. I introduced her to my friends from the community center, bringing her into my world. June noticed these changes with visible relief. One evening, he pulled me aside in the kitchen while Jia was in the living room. Thank you, Mom, for making this effort. I know it is not easy for you to be vulnerable and trust after everything. I looked at my son, this man I had raised with such fierce determination, and felt my heart swell. You were right during the confrontation. I taught you to be honest and trusting, but I had stopped living those values myself. Jia is giving me a chance to relearn them. He hugged me, and I let myself lean into his embrace, accepting comfort without feeling weak. The turning point came during a simple afternoon about 3 months after everything had exploded. I was in my room, feeling unwell with a genuine headache, something I had not experienced during all my months of faking illness. Jia knocked and entered, concern on her face. Mom, you do not look well. What is wrong? Just a headache, I said. It will pass. She left and returned minutes later with pain medication and a cool cloth. She sat beside me on the bed, placing the cloth on my forehead with gentle hands. Let me know if you need anything else, she said softly. As she started to rise, I caught her hand. Thank you. For caring. For giving me another chance. She smiled, squeezing my hand. We are family. That is what we do. After she left, I lay there with the cool cloth on my head, feeling the genuine care she had shown, and realized that this was what I had been testing for all along. This moment of simple kindness, offered without calculation or resentment. This proof that I mattered to her, not because of what I could provide but simply because I was part of her family. And the beautiful irony was that I only received it after I stopped testing, after I stopped trying to control the outcome, after I allowed myself to be genuinely vulnerable. The peace we found was not perfect. It was not the idealized harmony I had once imagined. It was hard-earned and fragile, built on the rubble of our failures and mistakes. But it was real, and that made it worth everything. Spring came late that year, but when it finally arrived, it transformed everything. The cherry trees along our street burst into bloom, covering the sidewalks with pink petals that looked like snow in the warm sunshine. I stood at my window one morning, watching this transformation, and felt something similar happening inside me. It had been 6 months since the confrontation, 6 months of slow and deliberate rebuilding. The apartment that had once felt like a battleground now felt like home. Not perfect, not without tension, but genuinely home. Jia had been true to her word about cutting back her work hours. Her Fridays off became special days for us. Sometimes we would go to the market together, and she would ask me to teach her how to select the best vegetables, the way I had learned from my own mother decades ago. Other times we would visit museums or attend cultural events, exploring the city together like friends rather than obligatory relatives. One Friday, she suggested something unexpected. "Mom, I want to meet your friends. The real ones, from before you moved in with us. The ones you used to organize activities with." I was surprised. "Why?" "Because they are part of who you really are. And I want to know that person." So I arranged a tea gathering with my old community center group. 5 women I had known for years, strong and capable women who had built lives through difficulty and determination. I was nervous about how they would react to Jia, knowing they had heard about the family dinner incident. But Jia won them over with genuine curiosity and respect. She asked them questions about their lives, their work, their wisdom. She listened to their stories with real attention. And when they told embarrassing stories about me from years past, she laughed with delight rather than judgment. After the gathering, as we walked home through the spring afternoon, Jia was quiet for a while. "They are amazing. Your friends. So strong and interesting." "They are survivors," I said. "They have all been through difficult times." She glanced at me. "You are like them. I did not see it before because you were hiding it. But you are incredibly strong. Stronger than I will probably ever be." "Strength is not one thing," I replied. "You have strengths I do not have. You built a successful career. You are confident in ways I never was at your age. We are just strong in different ways." She linked her arm through mine as we walked. "I am learning so much from you. About resilience. About how to face hard things and not let them break you." I patted her hand. "And I am learning from you. About flexibility. About how to adapt and change. I spent so many years being rigid, thinking there was only one right way to live. You are teaching me there are many paths." June noticed the change in our relationship with obvious relief and happiness. He stopped trying to mediate between us because we no longer needed mediation. The 3 of us began functioning as a real family unit, making decisions together, supporting each other through challenges. When June received a job offer that would have required relocating to another city, we had a long family discussion about it. In the past, such a decision would have been fraught with tension. I would have felt excluded and afraid of being left behind. Jia would have felt torn between her own preferences and obligation to me. But this time, we talked openly about all the factors. June's career goals. Jia's work situation. My connection to this city and my friends. We weighed everything together, and ultimately decided that the benefits of staying outweighed the career advancement of moving. But the key was that it was truly our decision. I did not manipulate or guilt them. Jia did not try to exclude me from the discussion. We trusted each other enough to be honest about what we wanted and what we feared. About 7 months after the confrontation, Jia came to me with news that changed everything again. "Mom, I am pregnant." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. A baby. A grandchild. The future manifesting in the most beautiful and terrifying way. I felt tears spring to my eyes. "Oh, daughter. That is wonderful." She was crying too. "I am scared. I do not know if I will be a good mother. My own mother was so difficult. What if I repeat those patterns?" I took her hands in mine. "You are already aware of those patterns, which means you can choose differently. You will make mistakes, as all parents do. But you will love this child. That is what matters most." Over the next weeks, as Jia's pregnancy progressed, I watched her blossom with a new kind of vulnerability. She asked me endless questions about pregnancy, about childbirth, about raising children. And I shared everything I had learned, holding nothing back. One evening, as we sat together looking at baby items online, she said something that took my breath away. "I want you to be very involved with this baby, Mom. I want you to teach them the things you taught June. Your strength. your values, your stories. I felt overwhelmed with gratitude and hope. You trust me with that? I trust you completely, she said. And I want this baby to know their grandmother, the real you, not the person you were pretending to be. When I told my friends at the community center that I would be a grandmother, their joy matched my own. But one of them, my friend Hui, pulled me aside afterward. Mei Lin, I have watched you transform over these months. You have grown so much. But I have to ask, do you regret the test? All the pain it caused? I thought about her question carefully. I regret the method. The deception was wrong. But I do not regret that it forced all of us to face our true selves. Sometimes we need crisis to break through our walls and facades. The test was a terrible way to create that crisis, but the growth that came from it has been real. She nodded thoughtfully. And Jia? Do you believe she truly changed, or is she just being nice because you have money? I smiled. She does not want my money. We have talked about it explicitly. She and June are financially stable on their own. What she wants is connection, belonging, a family that sees and values her. That is what we all want. As Jia's due date approached, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. The fear that had driven me to create the test. The pain we had all endured. The difficult process of letting masks fall and facing truth. The slow rebuilding of trust. If I could go back, would I do it differently? Absolutely. I would have been brave enough to be myself from the beginning, to trust that love and honesty were stronger foundations than tests and manipulation. But I could not go back. I could only move forward with the wisdom earned through failure. The baby arrived on a warm summer evening. A girl, perfect and tiny, with June's eyes and Jia's delicate features. When they placed her in my arms, I felt something complete itself in my heart. This child represented hope. The proof that our family had not just survived our wounds but had grown strong enough to nurture new life. Jia watched me hold her daughter with a soft smile. We want to name her Lin Mei. Lin for grandfather she never met, and Mei for you, Mom. Is that okay? I could barely speak through my tears. It is more than okay. It is beautiful. In the weeks after Lin Mei's birth, I moved into a supportive grandmother role that felt natural and joyful. I helped with night feedings. I shared the knowledge I had gained from raising June. But I also respected boundaries, never overstepping, always asking rather than assuming. And Jia, tired and overwhelmed with new motherhood, accepted my help with grace. She had learned to let people care for her without seeing it as weakness. And I had learned to offer help without trying to control outcomes. One afternoon, as I rocked Lin Mei while Jia napped, June sat beside me with a look of contentment I had not seen in years. You know, Mom, for a while I thought our family might not survive everything that happened. But look at us now. We are stronger than ever. Sometimes things have to break before they can heal properly, I said quietly. Like a bone that sets wrong and needs to be rebroken to mend correctly. We had to break the false patterns to build something true. He nodded. Do you think Jia has really forgiven you for the test? I looked at my son honestly. I think forgiveness is not a single moment but an ongoing choice. Some days it is easier for her than others. Some days old hurts surface. But we have learned to talk about them instead of hiding them. That is what makes the difference.